Good morning, and what an honor to be here with you. Everybody doing good today? Wow, this is great. I bring you greetings from Memphis, Tennessee, and we're having a good old time down there in the Bluff City, the home of Elvis Presley and Dry Rub Barbecue. I want to give you a little update on what I've been up to over the past couple of years. Many of you know that I was at Fox News for about 15 years and returned home to Memphis right as the pandemic was getting underway. And it was really interesting. I was still living in New York City at the time, and I got an urgent message from my Uncle Jerry in Coldwater, Mississippi. And he said that I had to return home immediately. Apparently, a great calamity had befallen Memphis. And I told him I was very much aware of that, and I told Uncle Jerry that calamity had befallen the entire world. But then he told me it had nothing to do with the China virus. Apparently, a bunch of vegans purchased Uncle Jerry's favorite barbecue joint. The first thing they did was put unsweet tea on the menu, and then they started serving something called dry rub barbecue tofu. True story. So I got the next Delta flight out of New York City and got back home as quickly as I could. I also bought a news radio station. You know, George Soros just purchased hundreds of conservative talk radio stations around the nation, and you should be very, very concerned about that. But the good news is there's at least one radio station in America that is rock solid conservative, and we are triggering liberals all over the Mid-South at KWAM. As a matter of fact, one of my very first employees, our morning show host, is a graduate of Cedarville University. Most of our staff are either homeschoolers, they come from Christian schools and universities. And our morning show host, several years ago, when he was a freshman, came up to me at a Values Voter Summit right here in this hotel. I had just wrapped up an interview with Tony Perkins, and he said, "I want a job working for you when I get out of college." And so now he is, according to the industry trades, one of the top 10 morning talk show hosts in America. So we're really excited about Ben Dieter. As a matter of fact, Ben is from Pennsylvania, and he sent me a text last night. He is going to be covering President Trump's return to Butler County, Pennsylvania later today. And then 2 years ago, I thought I was done with TV. I really did. My radio station's in between two barbecue joints. So as you can tell, I love barbecue. And I got a call from Chris Ruddy, who is the owner of Newsmax. It is now the fastest growing cable television channel in America. And they wanted to offer me a position, and I got to tell you, I was just as stunned as anybody else in this room that they would want me on TV. I do not have Hollywood hair. My body has been sculpted by pork, and I refuse to shave my legs for those glass desktops. But they gave me a show anyway, and I got to tell you, it's the wildest hour on cable television. You never know what I'm going to say, what's going to happen. It's an absolute free-for-all. We take on everybody. Love debating the Democrats, and you're not going to believe this. We actually had a Democrat I converted to the Republican way of thinking on television. It was like a political conversion experience. So anyway, wow, what a mess the country is in right now. Has anybody noticed that? We talk about this every day, noon to 3 on my national radio show, and we get a lot of calls from people that are just really concerned about the direction of the country. President Biden may or may not be the actual president of the United States of America. Kamala Harris, may I just ask a question? What's up with the cultural appropriation? Right? She's a very well-spoken, well-educated woman, but every time she comes down south, she acts like she's trying out for a Tyler Perry Medea movie. Talking about hot sauce, dropping her G's, says she puts collard greens in her bathtub. Now, I want to talk about that as a Southerner for a moment, because I polled just about every cook south of the Mason-Dixon line, and nobody washes their collard greens where they wash their badonkadonks. So just want to set the record straight there. And then there's Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. There's really no polite way to say this, ladies and gentlemen, but that man's cornbread is not done in the middle. Here's a guy who looks like he would be more comfortable in a chorus line of a Bob Fosse Broadway musical. Right? I mean, What man does that? Seriously, what man does that? What Midwest dad does that? I don't know. Here's a guy who put lady products in boys' bathrooms. They call him Tampon Tim. And then he signed a law allowing babies to be killed on their birth date. Now, that's not weird. That's evil. That's evil. I have a new book. It came out in March, and I don't believe there are copies here, but I want to encourage you to get one of this. It's called Twilight's Last Gleaming, Can America Be Saved? President Trump sat down with me for an interview, invited me to Mar-a-Lago, and sat down for about 2 hours and interviewed the president and talked about the future of the country. A lot of people said, Todd, did you stay at Mar-a-Lago? No, I thought about it, but I decided to stay at the Hampton Inn because you get the free breakfast there, and they don't do that at Mar-a-Lago. But the president said, this is the one book you need to read before the election. And it sounds ominous. Can America be saved? But I believe America can be saved. Now, at first glance, you would think there's no way that America can be saved, right? Our public schools have been turned into indoctrination centers for Marxist propaganda. A generation of children have been taught to hate our country, our founding fathers. They've been told they may not be little boys or little girls the way God created them. You know, I wrote a column about this recently. Jack and Jill went up the hill and came down gender neutral. Men have been told they are toxic, and women have been told that their life cannot be fulfilled unless they go out of the home and into the workforce. Our nation has been invaded by tens of millions of illegal aliens, and lawmakers on my national radio show tell me every single time it is not a matter of if, but when the terrorists will strike our homeland. And those responsible will have snuck in across our southern border. The very foundations of our freedom have come under attack. On Wednesday, the vice president announced that the average American citizen is worth $750. Meanwhile, our government provided more than $1 billion in aid to the illegals. $1 billion to the illegals, $750 to the good people in the Southeast. Billions more to Ukraine. And just yesterday, the administration announced hundreds of millions of dollars for Lebanon. And yet the good people of East Tennessee and Western North Carolina get $750 to rebuild their destroyed lives. Volunteers have been told that their help is not needed. Private pilots who rescued trapped survivors were threatened with arrest. There are reports that even people connected to Elon Musk were told to stand down, that the government was in charge. Well, I want to say this to all of you in this room and all of you watching today, that the government has no right to stop you from helping strangers in need. And there is something morally wrong. There is something morally wrong with a nation whose government puts the needs of illegal aliens ahead of law-abiding, tax-paying American citizens. But I have hope in America. We are at an inflection point in American history. On Election Day, we will decide once and for all, are we going to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, or are we going to become a godless Marxist regime? There is no doubt that our nation is in the throes of chaos. John Adams predicted it. He said our Constitution is wholly inadequate for anyone other than a moral and a religious people. Many churches and denominations across our great land have disengaged from the fight. They have retreated from the public square. My Faith Votes tells us 25 million of our fellow Christians are not registered or are registered to vote, but they don't vote. Some 15 million of us are not even registered to vote. And that tells me that Christians are part of the problem. The great Adrian Rogers once said, "We are to be civil lambs, but not silent lambs. We are to be salt and light, but far too many of our believers are on a sodium-free diet." But I have hope for America. I have a great hope because my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I have hope because God is still moving in this nation, and I have hope because of organizations like Family Research Council and leaders like Tony Perkins who are calling us to pray and to vote and to stand. And I am telling you that people are beginning to heed Tony's call across the nation. Just a few weeks ago, I was in Lancaster, California at Lancaster Baptist Church and West Coast Baptist College. The pastor issued a call, a challenge to the congregation. He asked 1,000 church members to gather up 100 gospel tracts and knock on 100 doors to share the gospel message. Now, many of us in this room are very active politically, and we have no problem going door knocking for candidates. Let me ask you a question. How many of you are willing to go door knocking for Jesus? Because let me tell you something, that's how we're going to do it. Now, when you start doing the math in Lancaster, California, in northern Los Angeles County, when it's all said and done, that church will have witnessed to over 100,000 people. That is how you change America. I want to tell you about Jimmy Hayward, a middle schooler at St. Bonaventure Catholic School in Huntington Beach, California. He decided to run for student council. He wanted to make his Catholic school great again. And he got little red hats made up, and he had a whole campaign slogan. Well, the school said, "You can't do that. You might offend people, Jimmy." Jimmy was upset because some of his classmates were eating nachos during the national anthem, which is not only inappropriate, but also dangerous. You don't want to get a nacho lodged in your throat when you're singing the high notes. But the school said, "Jimmy, you can't do that. You can't tell kids they've got to be respectful to the national anthem. You can't do that." They wouldn't let Jimmy deliver that speech. Well, guess what happened? We let Jimmy deliver that speech on my national television show on Newsmax. I have hope because of people like the fraternity brothers at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. These young men saw Old Glory under attack by a bunch of Jew-hating anti-Semites. And what did they do? They encircled Old Glory. Those boys were pelted with rocks and bottles. They were heckled and cursed at, bullied and harangued. But those young men stood their ground, and Old Glory still waves today. Oh, I have hope in America because of young ladies like Riley Gaines taking a stand for female athletes across America. And let me tell you what happened just yesterday. 4 universities announced they would no longer compete against San Jose State University because San Jose State has a man on their volleyball team. Yes, something's going on here, folks. I have hope because of what's happening this morning in East Tennessee and Western North Carolina. Men on horseback leading packs of mules into the countryside, delivering insulin and food and supplies to people in need. Volunteers defying the government and loading up cargo in big rigs and SUVs. Churches becoming sanctuaries for local citizens. Southern Baptist and yellow disaster relief shirts. And just last night on my Newsmax show, we had the Liberty University leaders. Dozens of kids are on their way right now to the danger zone, giving up their fall break to help others. I asked a man on Newsmax last night. It was kind of a softball question. My producers didn't know that. And I asked him, I said, "What compels those kids to do something like that?" And the guy looked into the camera and he said, "Jesus." That's how you change America. Our faith compels us to jump into the fight, not run away from the fight. Our faith compels us to help people in need. Our faith compels us to share the gospel message. You see, the problem facing our nation is not political. No, the problem facing our nation, it's a spiritual problem. In my book, I take us back to the 1960s when Reagan and William F. Buckley Jr. were waging this culture war. The fight they were fighting is the fight we are fighting today. What is old is new again. They were fighting the communists. And Reagan understood this one important thing about communism. The fight is not political, it is moral. Good versus evil. We must return to the values of our founding fathers. You see, only God can save America. And for that to happen, we must direct our attention away from Washington, D.C., and focus our efforts on our towns and our communities and our houses. We have to restore the church as the center of life in our communities. We must share the gospel message, the good news that Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. You see, in the midst of the chaos, we must turn our eyes towards Jesus. In closing, I write in my book about a moment in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan was in the White House, my favorite president. The country was in great turmoil. You might remember those days. No one knew when the nuclear bombs might start falling. There were real concerns back then. There was chaos in the culture back then. Reagan was going through a bit of chaos as well, personal. His father-in-law, Loyal Davis, was nearing the end of his life. His father was an atheist. So in the face of all this chaos that was happening around the world, Reagan walked into the Oval Office one day and he sat down at the desk and he handwrote his father-in-law a letter. 4 pages. Not many people know about this letter. He decided to share the gospel message with his father-in-law. And it was a beautiful letter. And I want to read a portion of it, if that's okay with you, as we wrap up our time here this morning. Here's what Reagan wrote. The Apostle John said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believed in him would not perish, but would have everlasting life." We have been promised that all we can do is ask God in Jesus' name to help when we have done all we can, when we've come to the end of our strength and abilities, and we'll have that help. We only have to trust and have faith in his infinite goodness and mercy. Loyal, you and Edith have known a great love, more than many have been permitted to know. That love will not end with the end of this life. We've been promised this is only a part of life, and that a greater life, a greater glory awaits us. It awaits you together one day, and all that is required is that you believe and tell God you put yourself in his hands. He didn't sign that, the President of the United States. He didn't sign it, Ronald Wilson Reagan. He signed it simply, "Love, Ronnie." In spite of the chaos, Reagan kept the main thing, right? That's what we have to do. Keep our eyes focused on Jesus. Now, my fellow patriots, when I addressed this esteemed body for the first time more than a decade ago, I told you that a former president accused folks like us of clinging to our guns and our religion. A former first lady called us a basket of deplorables, irredeemable. Well, on this day, many years later, in the shadow of our nation's capital, I proudly stand before you as a gun-toting, Bible-clinging son of a Baptist. I'm not bitter, I'm blessed, and I'm not irredeemable because I've been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. I want to invite you to listen to my show. If we don't carry the show on your local radio station, you can listen to us online at toddstarnes.com. We have a free newsletter, free podcast, great resources for you to check out. And we try to keep you updated on all the major culture war stories of the day. Finally, I want to share with you these words. We have a job to do. Now, I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. But I will tell you this, you gotta vote your values. Did I get everything I wanted in this election cycle from the Republicans? Absolutely not. But you know what? That's a fight that we can fight another day. Right now, we've got a country to save. And I'm with Elon Musk. I truly believe that if Kamala Harris gets into that White House, this very well could be the last election cycle we have. I truly believe that. So I leave you with these words from the great hymn writer. Rise up, O men of God. Rise up, O women of God. Happy warriors, one and all. And I promise you that if we pray together, if we vote together, if we stand together, we will win the day. And the United States will once again be that great shining city on a hill. God bless you all, and I look forward to seeing you on TV and the radio. Thank you very much.